How fire learned to move underground. For a long time, fire ruled the surface. The ground itself burned, flowed, and vanished without warning. Then, slowly, the planet buried its fire. After Earth learned how to preserve its surface, a new transformation began beneath it. This matters because surface survival alone was not enough. As long as heat escaped violently and unpredictably, stability remained fragile. Earth needed a way to move its internal energy without constantly destroying what lay above. The planet's challenge was not to eliminate its thermal power, but to redirect it into pathways that could sustain motion without erasing progress. The solution did not arrive suddenly. Over immense spans of time, the crust thickened and strengthened, forcing heat to travel longer paths before reaching the surface. Magma no longer burst upward everywhere. Instead, it began following weaknesses, fractures, and zones of stress that repeated rather than wandered. The randomness that characterized earlier volcanism gave way to something more structured as the planet's internal energy sought and reinforced consistent escape routes. Fire was being guided. Deep within the mantle, convection became more organized, forming slow, looping currents that carried heat sideways as well as upward. This redirected energy away from the surface and into motion beneath it. The planet was no longer venting randomly. It was circulating. These convective cells operated on timescales so vast that their motion was imperceptible from any human vantage point. Yet their cumulative effect reshaped the entire planet's thermal architecture. At the surface, this change was subtle but profound. Volcanic eruptions became less frequent and more localized. Vast regions cooled and remained intact for longer periods. The ground could now store history instead of constantly losing it to flame. Areas that had once been indistinguishable from the volcanic zones now began to develop their own character, accumulating layers of cooled rock that thickened and stabilized over time. Earth had not extinguished its fire. It had hidden it. And by moving destruction underground, the planet took another step away from erasure and toward endurance. This redirection of heat transformed the planet's internal behavior in ways that were not immediately visible at the surface. As energy flowed to the mantle instead of erupting upward indiscriminately, pressure redistributed across vast regions beneath the crust. The interior became dynamic rather than explosive, allowing motion to replace rupture as the primary release mechanism. The difference was fundamental. Rupture destroys structure, while motion preserves it. These slow currents acted like underground rivers of heat, transferring energy from hotter regions to cooler ones and smoothing extremes that once threatened surface survival. Where magma did rise, it did so repeatedly along the same paths, reinforcing structural weaknesses and leaving surrounding areas undisturbed. Destruction became predictable enough to be tolerated. The planet's surface could now plan around disruption, in the geological sense, by developing structures that accommodated recurring activity rather than being destroyed by it. The crust responded by thickening further in stable regions, insulating the surface from deeper heat. This insulation did not trap energy dangerously, but delayed its escape long enough for it to be carried laterally and released elsewhere. Earth was learning how to separate internal intensity from surface expression. The thermal gradient between interior and exterior became mediated by distance and material, creating a buffer zone where energy could be redirected before reaching the surface. This separation allowed landscapes to persist across longer spans of time. Rock layers accumulated. Fault lines developed memory. Boundaries formed that could be reactivated without collapsing the entire surface. The planet's architecture was becoming layered, with each depth operating on its own timescale. The surface measured change in millions of years. The deep mantle measured it in hundreds of millions. This layering of temporal scales gave the planet resilience, allowing different parts of the system to absorb and respond to change at different rates. Fire had not weakened, it had been rerouted, and with that rerouting, Earth reduced the risk that its own energy would erase what it had worked so long to preserve. As underground motion became the dominant outlet for Earth's internal energy, the planet entered a new phase of controlled transformation. Heat-driven currents beneath the crust began interacting with surface structure in consistent ways, creating the earliest outlines of plate behavior. The surface was no longer a passive lid. It was becoming segmented, responsive, and interconnected with what moved below. The relationship between crust and mantle evolved from one of simple containment into one of dynamic coupling, where each layer influenced the other's behavior. These segments of crust shifted slowly over the mantle, colliding in some regions while pulling apart in others. Where they converged, material thickened and folded, storing energy instead of releasing it instantly. Where they separated, magma rose gently, forming new surface without destroying old ground nearby. This balance allowed motion without catastrophe. The planet had discovered a way to be simultaneously active and stable, expressing its internal energy through movement rather than through destruction. The build-up toward this moment had taken immense patience. Countless cycles of heating, cooling, and deformation refined the boundaries between stability and motion. Earth did not invent this system in a single step. It emerged because controlled movement proved more sustainable than violent release. The planet was learning through endurance. Each failed attempt at stability, each cycle of surface destruction, contributed information that gradually shaped the system into its more organized form. This shift carried emotional weight because it marked a turning point in Earth's relationship with its own power. Energy no longer dictated outcomes. Structure did. The same heat that once erased the surface now sustained its motion, shaping the planet instead of threatening it. The planet had matured from a body dominated by its own thermal excess into one capable of harnessing that excess for constructive purposes. Fire had become part of the system, not an enemy, not a ruler. And with that change, Earth crossed into an era where movement itself preserved the world rather than endangering it. Earth was walking a narrow line between expression and destruction. The surface was no longer guaranteed, but it was no longer doomed either. The planet had reached a tipping point where survival depended on maintaining imbalance in the right places. The paradox of this era was that uniformity would have meant extinction, while imbalance, carefully distributed, meant preservation. The question was no longer whether Earth could hold a surface. It was whether it could keep holding it. The climax of this era arrived not with collapse, but with restraint. Earth did not eliminate its internal power. It learned how to vent it without surrendering the surface entirely. Volcanism became organized into recurring zones instead of erupting everywhere at once, allowing large portions of the planet to remain solid, while energy escaped where it could be tolerated. This organization was the planet's first act of self-regulation, a geological discipline that emerged not from design, but from the accumulated consequence of billions of years of trial. This shift changed the meaning of stability. The surface no longer depended on silence or inactivity. It depended on controlled motion. By concentrating destruction into specific regions, Earth preserved continuity elsewhere. Land could now persist long enough to influence climate, atmosphere, and future structure. The surviving crust became the seed of permanence, the foundation upon which all subsequent geological history would be written. The resolution lies in what did not happen. The planet did not return to a global magma ocean. Its surface was scarred, reshaped, and repeatedly challenged, but never erased all at once. Earth crossed a threshold where loss became regional instead of total. That distinction between total erasure and localized destruction proved to be the most consequential boundary the planet would ever cross. This moment echoes throughout the planet's later history. The same principle would govern tectonics, climate regulation, and even biological resilience. Survival would no longer mean avoiding catastrophe. It would mean surviving it in pieces. Earth almost lost its surface. What saved it was not cooling, but control. Subscribe to join the journey. How